Ambassador Atala, members of the Council, guests, and friends, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Baltimore Council on Foreign Affairs and on behalf of the World Trade Center Institute, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program. Before we begin, allow me to remind you that our next program will be on Tuesday, May 24th in the same room with Ambassador Alan Woods, who is the administrator of the Agency for International Development. The agency and the ambassador's career overlapped in several ways. As you know, we try to be comprehensive geographically over a period of time in the programs we have. We're delighted to have the ambassador, the representative of the country of Peru, with us this evening. He will articulate for you a variety of their concerns, political and economic, as well as their approach to foreign policy. So I will not mention the set of problems which Peru and other nations face, and he will do so. Let me merely mention that indeed he's enormously well equipped to make a presentation on behalf of his nation, a nation which is known to most of us in just the simplest of senses. We all appreciate the Inca civilization, its heritage for all of mankind, and we identify with and to a degree and have enormous sympathy for the problems which confront Peru and other nations in similar conditions. The ambassador is a graduate of the National University of San Marcos. He studied economics in both Germany and the United States. He served for over 2 decades as the managing director of a large number of corporations and enterprises. He has served with the Organization of American States. He's worked for well over a decade with the Inter-American Development Bank, serving ultimately as the executive director for Peru and Colombia to the Inter-American Development Bank. He also has served as Minister of Industry, Commerce, Tourism, and Integration. He's been an active member of the Aprista Party for over 3 decades, I believe, which in itself, of course, is an enormously interesting and sometimes very sad experience, as that political party has struggled to represent the Republic of Peru and the democratic political system. And of course, most recently and presently, the ambassador is representing the Republic of Peru in the United States. I know we all look forward very much to his comments. It's my great pleasure to present to you Mr. Cesar Atala, the ambassador of the Republic of Peru to the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a deep privilege and satisfaction for me to be here. It is really an honor, which is heightened in my mind by the fact that I was in Baltimore about 45 years ago during the Second World War, in which this country, the United States, played not only the biggest role in world history, but to me, one of the most moving. The experiences I had during my visits to the United States, and especially to Baltimore during the war, have impressed me tremendously in the way of giving me a very clear idea of the spirit of the American people. Its generosity and it is enormous facility to work miracles when the American people is moved by a great cause, the great cause. One of the greatest causes in our history, naturally, was what got the United States into the war, and be the real instrument of saving humanity of the horrors of Nazism and fascism. At that time, as a young fellow, I was a representative of a Baltimore firm in my country, the Crown Cork and Seal Company. Today, I don't even know this town has grown so much. I couldn't even find where was the hotel in which I used to live, and least of all, where was the factory for which I was working in Peru. I think it has become a site for apartment buildings, cafes, bars, stores, and other things. But one of the days, I will try to find out where the Crown Cork and Seal is and where my friends are, if they still are there. Now, 45 years later, I find myself as the ambassador of my country to the United States. A very interesting and at the same time a very trying experience. As you know, in modern times, in this century, diplomacy has changed profoundly, not only in its function, but also in its meaning. I suppose that in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, even 19th centuries, the ambassadors who were close to the sovereigns and emperors of the world were the messengers of the wishes and the small transactions between the states at that age and at that time. Today, the diplomatic corps has to be an entirely different sort of thing. Today, the sovereign or the president in the democratic countries do not mean any longer the messengers with the title of ambassadors to talk to each other. Today, the telecommunications, the electronic facilities are such that the president can very well pick up the telephone and call to the end of the world, calling for one of his colleagues. The ambassadors sometimes don't even know that those calls had produced themselves. So, the ambassadors and the diplomatic missions have other functions, and in a way perhaps far more important. And it is to foster the interchange, commercial, financial, cultural, personal even, between the peoples of the country that the ambassador represents and the country to which he is representing. And that is an extraordinarily important and pleasant function, one of whose aspects is the privilege of being here today, talking to distinguished members of the community in West Baltimore, having the opportunity of telling you something about my country. And I am not going to make propaganda for my country at this time. I am not even trying to picture the glories and the delights and the wonders of my country in the hope that some of you, or most of you, will be tourists in the next future. I am going to talk to you about the difficulties that we have in our country today. I'm going to share with you the problems that we have, not only in our relationship with the United States, but mainly in the relationship with ourselves in this time of tremendous crisis, moral crisis, financial crisis, economic crisis, in which we have to be in the country. The ingredients of foreign policy in times like this are mainly, and unfortunately, the problems that we have to deal with, and which we have to try to solve. It is no longer the pleasant show of achievements, of nice things that life may offer. Today we deal mainly with difficulties, as I said before, if not tragic facts and circumstances. The first issue in our relations with the United States is related to our foreign debt. As you are very well aware, this is one of the problems which worrying the statesmen and mainly the bankers, which are perhaps the victims all over the world in relation to the foreign debt. What has happened since 1982 in this world of ours? What has happened since before 1982? The debt was being paid more or less punctually, more or less normally. What has happened since then that almost no country of the so-called third world is in a position to pay and comply with its financial obligations as they should? Everybody is talking about all the aspects of the debt. Everybody suggests formulas to face it. Everybody complains about the attitudes of somebody else. Everybody has its own view of the debt problem. But as you very well know, nobody is doing anything about it in a very concrete and positive way. But what is the reason, as I asked myself before, that has put the world in this difficult position? I am going to advance something, a personal observation of mine. And it is that the technological revolution, which has helped so enormously the industrialized countries, has been in a way, and I hope very temporarily, some sort of a curse for many of the underdeveloped countries. The reason is that the technological revolution, which we should all welcome and be happy about, requires less of the raw materials that we use to export and sell and make our livelihood out of. Take the case in the case of Peru, take the case of copper. Copper, as you very well know, is one of the products that we use to export and sell to the United States and to the rest of the industrialized countries. But because of the advances of modern technology, which was substituted copper for fiberglass and many other ways of establishing facilities for communication, it so happens that today you could install the most sophisticated telephone services in Baltimore, or New York, or in Tokyo, or in Lima, without using as much as 1 foot of copper. Therefore, without anybody's special design, the net demand for copper has diminished considerably. At one point, for a very long time, the prices of copper turned around 60 cents per pound, which in many cases is hardly enough to cover costs of extraction. Take the case of silver. Peru, after Mexico, is the biggest producer and exporter of silver in the world. We had in the exploitation of silver one of the main sources of our revenues foreign exchange. But because of the advances of the technological revolution, the industrial uses of silver, the manufacturers of film, X-rays, and all that kind of material, because of the economies of substitution and savings and recuperation, need one fraction of the amount of silver to produce the same amount of film that they used to use in the past. Therefore, the net demand for our silver has diminished considerably. Let alone the speculation on silver that in the recent past created a very serious disarray in the silver market. And we, as a weak country, even though we are big country, suffer considerably from the consequences of all this. Take the case of fish meal. As you probably know, at one point Peru was the #1 fishing power in the world. How was that? How come Peru was such a big power? Simply we are blessed with the so-called Humboldt current across the Peruvian coast, which is cold current of water, which provides for different temperatures along our coast, and therefore we have, we have
Push it down.
all kinds of an enormous variety of fish that comes from cold waters, from temperate waters, from warm waters. Therefore, we had at one time a tremendous amount of fish which we converted in fish meal, which in turn was used as feed for fowls and as a way to help in agriculture. But then, because of the extension of soya cultivation, soya has replaced fish meal in this respect, and in this line too, we have suffered completely the decline of our income related to fish meal. Even oil, which, as you know, has been the darling of the economies of many countries for many years, because of the technologies of conservation and substitution, the better engines that modern industry is making now, fungi, to save fuel and all that, have diminished the potential of oil, and therefore has contributed to the diminution of our income in foreign exchange. All of this, together with other factors which I am going to mention later on, creates a financial situation so difficult that in 1980, before this government, the present government, took over in Peru, the previous government had to paralyze payments, could not pay, because simply there were no revenues, income enough to service external debt. So when this government was elected and took power, with its young president, Alan Garcia, a president at the time, 37 years of age, who was member of a party since his father was a member of the party, for a party who had waited for 60 years to get into power. Naturally, he arrived in power, as you would say colloquially, full of beans. And his first speech, as you will remember, was full of vigor, full of enthusiasm, and he then announced that Peru could not pay depended in excess of 10% of its foreign income out of its exports. Well, this was the statement of the facts. The previous government had already stopped the service of the debt. And then comes this young president and says, well, we are not going to pay back 10%. That was in my mind, and I was Minister of Industry into that government, so I approved of it. And I thought that it was all logical to say so. It was a statement of a financial fact. We cannot pay back 10%. But perhaps because of his rhetoric, perhaps because at the moment people were not yet used to the idea of the crisis of the debt, there was not yet the problem of Brazil and Argentina, and only the case of Mexico. So people would not accept this kind of a statement, and Mr. Garcia's statement was taken almost as a challenge to the system. And this complicated our relationship with the outside world, with the financial world, and here we are, still trying to patch up and trying to find a way in which we can understand each other in a better way. Something very difficult, because the main problems have not been solved. Our income, our exports are still declining. To give you an idea, our exports were about $22.5 billion in 1984, and according to the normal projections of the time, we should be exporting today about $4.8 billion a year. Well, we are exporting $2.4 billion, while our population, unfortunately, is growing at a much too high rate, and precisely because this was a democratic government, precisely because this was a government made of a party who for 60 years has been talking about social justice, talking about the need to democratically elevate the standard of living of the people. Precisely because of the rhetoric of the party itself, the need of the general population, the social pressures were heightened to a point at which the problem became extremely difficult, if not intractable. Together with this, we have another terrible problem. Terrorism. In 1980, at the inaugural of the first democratic government after the withdrawal of the military government, this terrorist movement under the name of Shining Path, I assure you nothing shining about it, they started this campaign of killing, bombing, indiscriminately, against everything, without nobody knowing what the plans are, what the purposes are, what the programs are, if any. They claim to be Maoists. They claim to be the real Communist Party. The fact is that in actual reality, they are only masters of death and of crime. This movement, this subversion, has naturally complicated the task of our democratic government. Because to fight against subversion requires resources, not only in the military sense, which by themselves already are tremendously costly, but resources to face the social pressures that are indispensable in order to have the population on the side of law and order. Because it's very difficult to ask the general population to be on the side of law and order, on the side of civilization, on the side of religious and moral conduct, when at the same time they are totally deprived of the most elementary necessities of life. This creates conditions which favor terrorism. Therefore, we have enemies wherever we look at. The debt on one hand, which deprives the natural resources to provide for growth. On the other side, terrorism, which would increase the need for resources and at the same time make it far more difficult to have a calm head to try to solve your problems in regard to growth, economic and growth and social development. On the other hand, you have the drug trafficking, which is another of the most horrible plagues that are punishing my country today. As you all know, Peru is one of the biggest producers of coca leaves. The production of coca leaves was an innocent agricultural function up to a few years. I was born in a village in the Andes where most of the population is Indian. I was born in this place, and ever since I opened my eyes to life, I saw them chewing coca. They would put 2, 3, or 10 leaves in one side of their mouth. Apparently, this helped them with some calories. Almost other people say that there are some religious meanings in this kind of habit. The fact is that the chewing of coca leaves by themselves did not apparently do much harm. Certainly not to compare with the harm that cocaine did. I will tell you one anecdote that it will be probably a little hard for you to believe. It was precisely during the war. I used to travel from my country to the United States because I was trying to put up some industry there. And I had a very good friend in New York, one of our best writers, Cesar. He had come to the States to collect one prize given at the time for the best literature work. That was in 1948. And this gentleman, who is dead now, at the time he was member of my party. We were very good friends. He also came from the Andes. And contrary to my family's habit, in my family there was no need to chew coca. No, there was nobody liked it, so we watched the Indians chewing it, but we didn't have the need for it, not the liking for it. But my friend, the writer, told me one day in New York, "Why don't you please let me have a little bit of coca the next time you come?" I said, "Why not?" So the next time I bought, and this is something that probably you will not believe, that if the customs had some archives in Miami, they will tell you that what I am telling you is exactly true. So the next time I went to Peru, I bought 1 pound of coca, and I put it in my luggage. I went to Miami, and I declared it, of course. I said, "What are you bringing?" He said, "1 pound of coca." And the customer said, "What are you bringing this coca for?" And I laughed and said, "What do you do with this coca?" I said, "Well, perhaps to make Coca-Cola." Yeah, that's all the fellow said. "But don't they make cocaine out of this?" I think so, but I understand that to get a little bit of cocaine out of this, you need to fill the room with this beer. So, why? He let me back with my pound of coca, which I delivered in New York to my friend Cesar. The next time About 8 months later, exactly the same thing. And the same experience with one difference. But this time at the customs in Miami, they told me, where are you going to stay in New York? Hotel, so on, so. Okay, we have to send this to the Department of Agriculture first. Okay? I tell you, 3 or 4 days later in New York, I got my package of coca from the Department of Agriculture. Well, what is the lesson of all this? That at that time nobody saw the dangers of coffee. In my own country, there were very few addicts, and those who were known as addicts had a very bad name, and even the kids would point at them as something foreign to the society. Nobody liked it. They had a very bad name. In Spanish they call them pichicateros. I don't know if the Peruvian know what it means. But no problem, no real problem. I am not suggesting that the only problem is consumption. But what I'm saying is that if we don't pay attention to the demand, it will be very difficult to solve the problem only by trying to control the production. Extremely difficult. I think we have to be conscious of what the real problem is, what the real danger is, and join forces and join will and try to fight on both sides of the equation. Otherwise, we are going to have this problem, I don't know what kind of consequences for your society and our society. You are a very strong country. You are a big country. You are a rich country. And whatever damage this is doing to you, which is already regrettable and horrible, is nothing by comparison to what it's doing to our country. It is simply destroying the fabric of society now. Because now, as something horrendous happened, and that is the drug trafficking and terrorism are found in natural marriage, in natural partnership. The traffickers provide the terrorists with money, provide them with a weapon, the most modern, while the terrorists give them protection against the police. So we have a real cancer within our society, which, as I said before, threatens to destroy the very fabric of our society. So you can see how one small country is fighting in all fronts. It is no wonder that we are very criticized that our government has not done this or that or the other, that has failed in this or in that or the other. It is a very complex problem, a very difficult one, a very costly one. And the only thing we would like, and this is one of my points, is that this country knows. No. Because I know that for the American people understand the rest is easy. But unfortunately, it's also very easy that such a complex and big society, the American society, could have certain values, certain ideas, certain perceptions, not necessarily the correct ones in the case of foreign small countries 6,000 miles away from here. What is very easy, naturally, is to see the failings of our government, which I am not trying to either to deny or minimize. We have made tremendous mistakes. Tremendous mistakes. Lack of experience, lack of resources, whatever. We have made very serious mistakes, but we are in the process of trying to correct them and trying to have a democracy ever more stronger, and to serve the basis for better generations in the future. we have, as I repeat, this problem that I described to you. But we have assets in our favor. One of our assets is our relationship with this country. Lately, it appears as if my country was one of the rebellious countries because we did not want to deal with the IMF, for instance, or because we don't agree with the U.S. government in its dealings with Nicaragua. Those are things that have to happen because even though we basically agree on the fundamentals, we seem to disagree in the way and the form in which the same problem is faced by the two different countries. There are two different perspectives, and it is only natural that we have to disagree on many things. But basically, we have a tremendous admiration for this country. We like it very much. There's never anti-Americanism in Peru, regardless of what the professional leftists would say and do say. But in the general population of Peru, there's absolutely nothing against this country. On the contrary, there's tremendous sympathy. And we expect that by hard work, stamina, and perhaps a little bit of better luck in the future, we're going to help solve our problems. I thank you very much. I don't want to tire you with more of our tragic problems, and I'm willing to answer to any questions that you may like to ask me. Thank you very much.
The ambassador will answer questions until 10 minutes after 7. Yes, ma'am.
Do you foresee asking
Yes, there are two questions. The first is, would you consider asking for American military assistance under any circumstance? And your specific instance was the Senderos and Chupa. And the second question is, do you take his political candidacy seriously?
Yeah. Good. Very good. To the first question, the answer is absolutely no. Absolutely no, because it would be counterproductive, completely and totally. So we would never ask for military help from the United States to solve our problem. By no means. In reference to Mario Vargas Llosa, let me tell you this. We are, of course, proud of Mario. Personally, he's an excellent friend of mine. And since my government made a tremendous mistake in July last year, trying to staticize the banking system, for which we have repented already, the government has repented. But anyway, at that point, but it was a reason. Perhaps I'll take the opportunity to explain to you why this was made, why this mistake was made. As many of you will remember, or most of you should know, that during the crisis of 1929, when you have your financial crisis here, as you know, about 650 American banks collapsed, went into bankruptcy. The reason for these banks to go into bankruptcy at that time, or so was the official explanation of the time, was that because at that time banks used to do all kinds of business besides banking. The banks were in real estate, banks were in export and import, investments of all kinds besides banking. So when the stock market crashed and the whole thing went wrong, obviously this the banking system, which was committed to lots of the problems related to the crisis. Well, in my country, to this day, the bank did exactly the same thing. The bank is in real estate, agriculture, mining, and everything. So instead of trying to regulate this through the proper authorities, the government made the mistake of trying to go, trying to kill a fly with an atomic bomb. That was. But now things have been corrected to a great extent, and we regret the mistake. But Mario Vargas Llosa, a very intelligent man, took the opportunity to call to a meeting to everybody to defend freedom. Apropos, this statization project of the government. The ironic part of it was that he was defending freedom, enjoying the widest freedom imaginable, because nobody in Peru at that time, we have made lots of mistakes, but not one against freedom. It's freedom of association, freedom of the press, freedom of work. You can say anything you want. Every paper of the opposition is full of the worst adjectives and insults against the president and against the members of the Congress of the party. There's no problem in that respect. But Mario and his friends, and mostly his political friends of the right, saw in this government mistake a wonderful opening for a political possibility. And they have organized a movement. And I am sorry that Mario is part of what is called in Peru the right. Because in Peru the right are different to other countries. If I were American, most probably I would be conservative. For the very simple reason that you have something to conserve. But in our countries where you have everything to make, it is not a question of destruction, it's a question of trying to make a country out of nothing. There is nothing to conserve there. It's a lot to construct and build, not to conserve. And Mario, a man who was, as everybody knows, of an avant-garde thought until very recently, has taken this opportunity, in my mind, to make perhaps the return trip to good reason. That I am very sorry that he's doing so in bad company.
Yes, Mr. Ezra.
I would like to ask you, sir, I gather that much of the business that goes on in Peru is closely related with shelters in Chile. Or that there's, I'd like you to explain the difference, the relationship between Chile and Peru at this time.
Just for the benefit of the audience, Mr. Cesar would like to have the ambassador explain the relationship of Chile and Peru, but specifically business relationships.
Yeah.
As neighboring countries, Chile and Peru, despite the fact that well over 100 years we had a war, we maintain excellent and friendly relationships with Chile. And our trade relationship with them is quite active and quite advantageous to both countries. Now, there are differences in the way of, in the system. They have not precisely a democratic government. We do have a democratic government, but despite this difference, we maintain excellent and friendly relationships with Chile.
Did you have something more specific in mind, Mr. Adjunct?
Well, I really referring to the fact that it seems to me so much of the business that's going on in Chile, the money somehow lands in, the business that goes on in Peru, the profits seem to be invested in Chile somehow.
The question is whether there is some kind of manipulative system through which profits made in Peru end up in Chile. Is there, in short, a Chilean control of much Peruvian business?
I don't think there are any statistics to show that in a way that could be enlightening. It's very likely that some people take their money from Chile, but there is no substantial investment of Peruvian money in Chile that we know of. No. There are more in the United States than in Chile.
Yes, ma'am.
With mining unprofitable and coca undesirable, what products could Peru substitute to help the economy?
Given your earlier description of the loss of your traditional exports, what are the options? What alternatives do you have?
Your question is a very good question and hasn't been answered, not even by the best experts of the United States and Peru who are studying the problem now. Because the question is how to substitute the coca plantation so that the farmers in that region should help abandon the coca fields. Is that the sentence? To this day, that hasn't been determined that clearly. What the Peruvian government, with the help of the United States government, is giving incentives of all kinds to the farmers there to change the crops. But unfortunately, the drug trafficking seems to be the provider of so much money that they are always ahead of whatever program you have in the way of substitution to this day.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask a question about the Peruvian cultural resources. I've heard of the reanimation of Uma Sumak's career. I was wondering how the Peruvian government felt about that and what they were doing and how is it going?
Well, let me tell you that you have given me a wonderful opportunity to inform you that in our Washington residence, which is one of the most beautiful mansions, by the way, that still remains in Washington. They say that it is one of the 4 mansions in the Washington area. We have there, and it contradicts all my story of our poverty and our difficulties. We have 25 acres of land in the heart of Washington. I'm afraid of living in such a palace. I live in my modest house in Maryland, in Rockville, Maryland. I am a taxpayer in the state of Maryland since 20 years ago, when I bought that little house. I don't live in that house because I have the project of converting the right wing of that residence into a museum to help show the many aspects of the Inca culture. We are going to have an exhibit of ceramics, textiles, gold of the time of the Incas, and we are going to have one member of our embassy bilingual with much better English than I have, so that he can explain to the students of the area once a week everything about the Peruvian culture. And I hope that this project will be ready in 6 months from now, with the help that we are getting from the National Gallery, the Smithsonian Institution, and the Corporate Gallery. In respect to Ima Sumac, whom I know quite well personally, she's living in Peru. I think visits California once in a while, where she used to be for quite some time. And she still sings from time to time. Of course, at her age, the sixth scale seems to be failing a little bit.
Hey, it drops down to 5. It's fine.
Mr. Ambassador, what do you think about what the impact of legalization of drugs in the United States and in your country would have on the fear of drug trafficking?
Sir, I don't think my opinion is of much importance, but if you allow me to tell you my opinion, I would very much prefer that this idea is studied seriously and carefully. I think it would help. Because in my mind, the drug trafficking has two very clear aspects. One is related to money, to the money-making possibilities of this horrendous traffic. The other side is the health and the moral side. We are trying to solve both problems at the same time, and we are getting nowhere. If we could help solve the first problem, the financial, we could perhaps eventually be far more powerful and more resourceful to address the moral and the health problem. This is my opinion. I am not an expert, but I wish to God that experts would come up and say it would be a very good idea to study the possibilities of legalizing it. I think at least by getting the traffickers out of the picture, we might be in a better position to address the other serious problems related to the moral and the health side.
I understand that the people in Peru chewing that coca leaf that is not as harmful as the refined product. Do you have people in Peru who are using the refined product that would produce the problem we have here? And is it to what extent is it?
Yes. As I said before, the cocaine addiction in Peru was not a problem until perhaps 5-6 years ago. As you know, our societies now are linked, interrelated, closely dependent one to another. The communication is such that whatever is happening in the United States is seen in the remotest villages in my country. So now, today, we have this problem for the first time. And what is most horrendous thing is that they are teaching children to be addicted to this drug, as a way of having a market. So this is the extent of the crime. This problem we did not have until probably 5-6 years ago at all, except, as I said before, a few addicts who were known by everybody and not precisely respected by anyone. But now, the picture is different. It's not as bad as some parts that here but it's getting very bad.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ambassador, to come back to the cultural matter, for several years in the 1960s, I was a consultant to your alma mater at San Marcos, working with Carlos Alberto Seguin, whom you may know.
The doctor.
Yes, an old and close friend. My question is, there was a period when your government wanted to require Quechua in the schools as an aspect of biculturalism. What happened to that move?
Well, from the official point of view, it has, if not abandoned, the interest has diminished considerably from the official point of view. But, as you probably are aware, a different phenomenon has happened, and that is that the English-speaking people, the Quechua-speaking people of Peru, has overtaken Lima, the capital of Peru, including San Marcos. Therefore, the problem is no longer in the same shape as it was while you were working with Dr. Seguin. Today, the Andes, the population of the Andes has overtaken Lima, the population of Lima, which has now 6 million, probably is made out of 4.5 million of Quechua speaking people. I am one of them.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ambassador, what would be your country's reaction if General Noriega were removed from power by force?
My country would be very happy to see Noriega out of power. Removed by force, I would like to ask by what force? If you mean the United States invading Panama to get rid of Noriega, I don't think we would find that the means justify the end. We would, all of us, like to have Noriega removed, but not to that means. We think that the problem of Noriega is in a way related to the problem of democracy, of the form of government in Panama. We thought that we could all have embraced the movement to have Panama return to democracy, as you helped do in the Philippines, for instance, or in Haiti. If we had been doing that, the United States and the Latin American countries, Noriega, in my mind, would have become a totally minor problem, because he would have to get rid of by the act of going back to democracy in Panama. But today we have converted the problem, the United States versus Noriega. I think an inversion of values. I am not American, but I admire this country tremendously. I don't like to see this kind of equation. I think that Noriega, if the accusations of him are true and they seem to be so, is not precisely subject for confrontation to the United States. It should be taken with pinces to take out the head. But through the process of going back to democracy, not by military invasion. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, we do thank you for such a, I think, straightforward and serious presentation. That's very respectful of you. We're enormously grateful for that and for you taking the time to put us.